Huh. Are we going? Apparently we are.
You're on.
Hello, I'm Chelmsford Town Manager Paul Cohen, and welcome to another edition of the Town Managers Roundtable. I'm joined today by my co-host Colleen Stansfield.
Hello.
And our two guests for today's program are George Zaharoolis, the new committee member of the Master Plan, and Evan Belansky, our Community Development Director.
Good to be here.
And our topic is the town's Master Plan update. And George obviously was chosen because George lived the 2010 Master Plan, and he's here for a return journey.
Return journey is it.
And part of the committee did ask for two past members.
Right.
Yeah. So and, that last, the 2010 was a 20-month undertaking, and the result was a very, very good document. It was over 500 pages long, has a lot of information in there. It was really a more comprehensive plan than the previous plans. The previous plans were good. This was just a little bit more in depth. So I think coming forward, it's going to be interesting to see which direction the board chooses to go in, whether it's just a update or a complete rewrite. I personally don't think it needs to be a complete rewrite. I think it's simple update. I mean, there's some sections in there, like a facility section. Back in 2010, we were out of the center fire station on North Road. Since then, that's been built out. And, you know, there's not much else. I mean, DPW is hopefully going to get out of Richardson Road at some point. So, you know, that was noted in there. So I think that section is a real simple update, and maybe the manager's office can help us with that one.
Sure.
So, but I think the effort, in my opinion, is more economic development, housing, and land use and planning. But that's just my opinion. The committee hasn't met yet. We're meeting tomorrow night for the first time, and at 7 o'clock, and we'll see. We're going to lay the groundwork for what's going to come. I've already heard one member thinks it's going to take 24 months. I hope not. I think it can be done in 10 months to 12 months, but that's just my opinion. We'll see how that shakes out. So.
Oh yeah, let's take a step back. I mean, for people watching, obviously the state prescribes that every 10 years a community is to update its master
Correct.
plan.
Yeah.
And so as we noted, there was one in 2010 that, like you said, took 20 months or so. And then prior to that, there was one done in the 90s, the 80s, and you work your way back. And then I guess is more of an intro. Why don't you tell, well, for those who haven't seen you in a little bit because you've been away from the planning, but why don't you tell people your background in terms of planning in the community, just to have a flavor of why that you're back here again.
Well, I spent 13 years on the Chelmsford Planning Board. 2 of those years were as an alternate. When I first got on, I was the alternate, and then I became a full member. And then I was trying to get out at one point after about 9 years or so, and then there was an open seat, and I was filling in. I happened to be the alternate, and at that time, because no one ran, and they needed someone, so I stepped forward. And then there was an open seat. I filled that open seat for another couple more years. We didn't have too many people interested at the time to running for the board. So I've had 13 years on the Chelmsford Planning Board. I've been town meeting rep for over 20 years. So I think I bring a very good knowledge of where the boards have been over the last 13 years. We saw a lot of changes with some overlay districts and some zoning changes. So I think I can bring that definitely to the table in this master plan as well.
Okay. Evan, you want to sort of give an overview of the mechanics in terms of, obviously it's a committee that's the charge of the master plan belongs to the planning board.
Correct. Right.
They're the ones who own it, but then want to talk about sort of the composition of the committee?
Sure. So it's this time around it's made up of 2 former master plan committee members. George is one of them, and Linda Prescott is the other. There's 2 planning board members, Donald Van Dyne and Nancy Arroway. Ken LaFave is the Board of Selectmen representative, and there's 2 citizen reps.
Scott Rummel and Joe Reddy.
Joe Reddy.
Correct. So they've all been appointed and will be sworn in. And as George mentioned, the committee will meet for the first time tomorrow evening.
But you're also a veteran of the last master plan, is correct?
Yeah. So I've been through it once before as well, and I think as George said, the community has the 2010 master plan has served the community very well, providing a good roadmap and strategy, particularly for zoning. And as George mentioned, the planning board and town meeting over the last 10 years has spent a lot of time implementing the zoning recommendations. So I think from a zoning, planning, land use perspective, the 2010 plan served the community rather well. The discussion this time around will be whether the community views it as kind of trends continued, a complete rewrite, meaning change direction, or whether there's some kind of minor refinements to the strategy from a land use zoning perspective. Then there are, as George mentioned, there are other chapters related to transportation, land use, housing, facilities, open space, culture. And what's interesting is that the recommendations from 2010 talked about doing standalone plans for open space recreation, historic and cultural. Those are already in place. So this time around, there likely won't be a need to spend as much time and energy on as many of the chapters as we did on the 2010 version.
Now, when you finished the master plan, the 2010 master plan, you had an implementation committee. So are we going to pull out some of the things that were finished from the last master plan?
Yeah, I would imagine the committee within the first couple of meetings will review the recommendations section and do a status kind of update as to what's been done, what hasn't been done, try to identify items that haven't been done, the reason why. And again, from my experience, and George and maybe Linda, who served on the last one, looking back, there are certain recommendations and certain ideas and recommendations that aren't necessarily a good fit for an implementation committee. Examples are facilities,
Right.
where a citizen committee is really not in charge with implementing that strategy. So there may be an opportunity to kind of simplify the master plan and really focus on the items that the planning board and other regulatory boards and committees spend their time and energy on.
George, an interesting thing, and I want your perspective on this. It's a different time than 10 years ago. I mean, if you think back, in 2010, the community and the country was sort of coming out of a real bleak economic period in terms of the Great Recession, as we called it. You had more struggles with employment and so forth. And yet now you come back to 2019, heading into 2020, halfway there, and we're in sort of this period of prolonged, slow development where basically most of the community's employed and so forth, yet we still have some vacancies on 129. But do you see the climate as having any impact in terms of development of what the content and direction may be of the master plan?
Businesses have changed. The big footprint of buildings, people work from home now, so the footprints are smaller. So when they do have a footprint or an office building, they're looking for things to keep their employees close to that office. With the strategy that's been put in place, we're going to start to see some of those buildings on 129 grow as the more amenities. And if you look at, I guess, Boston, for instance, the businesses that have located in there, you try to find an apartment in there, you're going to pay $3,000, $4,000 a month. Mm-hmm. And if you come down 93 from 128 and you go down and you see all these big apartment buildings, so the apartment buildings coming out and there's businesses still growing. So it's starting to come this way. I really think that with the apartments that are being built on Turnpike, the 168 units, which is right in that industrial park, there's more people that are doing bicycling to work and walking to work. And of course, they're working from home as well. I just think that there's some opportunities in 129 that will be coming towards us. And I think we just have to be ready for them. And I think that the steps are being taken to head in that direction. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
but
because it
I
was
do.
different. I mean, 10 years ago, or 2012, we weren't talking about live, work, play. You know, we weren't seeing the migration of the young professionals into the core city of Boston and the suburbs.
Yeah, now they
It's
love
a
it.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's a
Right,
different
right.
economy and a different world.
Yeah.
I also think that the town of Chelmsford has probably changed in 10 years as well. You know, in terms of, you know, you've got, you know, everybody like us are 10 years older than we were 10 years ago, and you've got a new group of people coming in.
Not just the town of Chelmsford.
No, it's the world.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. yeah.
Everywhere.
And that's why the plan has to be
So,
updated.
You know, you
Right.
go to Billerica on 3A and you see all the apartments there.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it. You see them developing Middlesex Turnpike. All this growth is coming this way, and we need to be prepared for it. And I think we are. I think we're well prepared for a lot of things, and I think we've tried to put some zoning in place that will help our community fill those vacancies, try to get that commercial occupancy rate up,
Yeah.
which of course will increase the assessed values on properties. So, you know, I looked at the recommendations in the master plan, and I'll tell you, I don't know, all those recommendations, we had a pretty good track record.
We got a lot of
How
them
many
done.
were
Done.
done?
Yeah, Dave McLaughlin chaired that
So-
implementation committee and kept on it.
But the other thing too is, the master plan's a very high-level plan. It was designed at that time in 2010 to throw these ideas out there and, for instance, to let the planning board say, look, we have this idea on 129. You need to do your homework now and dig deeper into it. And there was a lot of recommendations for the town manager, for you to dig into it,
Yeah.
and you dug into them.
Yeah.
And there's some things that you just can't do, but they're ideas. And that's what this committee took the ideas and put them together, and then it's up to the respective departments and committees afterwards to dig deeper into it. And that's the way I view it.
Yeah,
That's the way I view it.
Some of the changes from 2010 are maybe, you know, what does retail look like over the next 10 years?
yeah.
That's a new concept. You know,
Right.
take Drum Hill, for instance. You know, what's the future of Drum Hill with national retailers closing and consolidation? A couple new themes could be the Age in Place initiative, as well as climate change, which is a state initiative. So I could see those being blended in to the new master plan as far as new concepts and new themes.
But one of the commonalities was the redevelopment of the town downtown, sort of the town
right.
center. And I think part of that has come. I mean, what's going on with Gristmill
Absolutely,
is
right.
part of that. And I think the Oddfellows is sort of that next chapter, which we really is in the rather immediate horizon, relatively speaking, in terms of what would happen in the center. So that's, you know, so there are some things that do remain constant
Correct.
in the center of town and making it walkable. And obviously you've been part of that issue of the Center Village master plan, you know,
Right.
wayfinding signage. You know,
Right.
yeah.
Well, you can look at what was done, I still call it Marshall's Plaza.
Yep, Purity Plaza. Purity Plaza.
Purity Plaza.
Yeah.
You know, Win Stanley did a great job with that plaza. So people can go there and enjoy a sandwich or sit down for fine dining. And, you know, if they want to go to the gym or get their nails done, there's a number of different little businesses in there. And it really complements the downtown area. And, you know, with Grist Mill being done, those units, I understand, are selling pretty good.
They're about half sold.
So, and that's pretty good for pre-construction. And, you know, so it's going to put more people down there. It's just going to help the stores like the card store and the little diners down there and that type of thing. So I look forward to seeing it. It's, you know, you have to think sometimes out of the box. And I know it doesn't make everybody happy all of the time, but, you know, the planning board tries its best. And when I was on it, we really worked hard, and Colleen was there as well. We worked hard to try to do what was right for the town as a whole, not for an individual, but as a whole. So, and that's what it counts.
You were on the planning board when the master plan was last updated?
2010.
Okay.
It was a while ago.
But one of the things you also have, much like last time, is you have resources coming, because some people may watch and think, well, what's this going to cost? But you do have resources coming in, like last time from NIMCOG, correct?
Correct. We applied for $25,000 from their local technical assistance pool of money, so we've received that. I've also informed the committee that there is a state grant opportunity available where we could use the $25,000 as matching. So tomorrow night at the committee meeting, we'll attempt to try to see if there's a committee interest or need to expand NIMCOG's services, or hire an additional specialized consultant. And we'll be interested to see how the committee wants to move forward on their public engagement community process. You want to describe what we did last time?
So I know last time we did at every meeting, the first 10, it was either 10 or 15 minutes, we had a public input session. It's similar to what the selectmen do at their meeting. The mic's open, you can come speak, give your points, and then we would then go into committee, or the committee, it's open to the public. And the committee amongst itself would discuss the topic that we have at hand, as well as what the speakers had mentioned. And then we go forward there. And then we had, I want to say it was 4 public input sessions in different locations. I know a couple of them were at the senior center, and they're on particular topics. And we reached out to the community to get their feeling on certain topics. I see with this plan, I see definitely during the meetings, we should have that open mic for the public input. And then I think it might be 2 or 3 public input sessions somewhere along the line. And NEMCOG helped us run them last time, and they tabulated the results, and it was a good take. It really was.
You did stakeholders as well. How many groups did you bring in?
Boy, I don't remember now.
Every
Like
department.
2 dozen.
Every department, we brought the fire, we brought building in, because when we were talking about, at the time, we were talking about, higher buildings. We brought the building inspector in and talked to him about it, and he told us about what codes would change. And we brought the fire department in, so they can tell us how high the ladder can go on a building.
Brought in all committees,
So,
all the committees.
Businesses too. You reached out to the
yeah,
businesses
we had a
as well.
business input session.
Do you foresee that again?
I would think.
I would think so.
Yeah, and the economic, because we have EDC now, which we didn't have before, which was, I think, a
Right.
recommendation from the last plan as well.
There you go, another one.
So there's another committee that has a lot of information that can bring it into us, and Don, who's on the planning board, is also on that committee, so that will help a great deal as well. So I think, and I think Joe's on there too, right?
Did,
Not anymore.
And Joe's
But
a
he
small
was.
business owner in town,
Right.
so.
Sure.
So they can definitely bring in aspects to that economic development portion.
So one area of focus I'd like to see emphasized this time around is try to engage with maybe the a teenager, high school level. I think that where we have the age-friendly focus, which is more on the senior component, I think there should be an attempt to engage with the kind of the youth of Chelmsford. Get a sense for what they think is good, what they think can be improved, what are some of the challenges.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting.
We don't have anything like a youth center. Those kids, between 14 and 18 are a little lost.
Yeah, it could be
know?
something as simple as, do you use the village? If not, what would make you use the village? What about Drum Hill? What types of amenities and restaurants and shopping experience are you interested in? I think for Chelmsford, many of those teenagers are likely going to end up living in Chelmsford, which has been a historic trend
Right.
in Chelmsford. Many people continue to live and want to move and raise their family here. So that's kind of the future of Chelmsford, and it would be good to engage with that stakeholder group.
Well, especially where there is a noted state initiative for civic engagement in the schools. I mean, that's
Exactly.
New programs are coming in where each student now at high school would have civics lessons and community engagement.
Does that start next year?
I believe it does start
Oh,
next
good
school
timing
year.
then.
Yeah, great timing. You could actually go in and
Yeah.
into the schools.
All right.
Yeah.
Then they can understand some of the process that the town government goes through as well.
You go to every town and look up their master plan.
Along the way, I mean, how will people be able to follow the process? I mean, obviously they can attend the meetings, but do you envision there being like draft documents, or more so even to you, George? Do you think there'll be like plans or documents online? Because nowadays, like you said, it's hard to engage people, as we said.
So last time what we did is we took each section one by one.
Yeah.
The board basically worked on each section, and then once we thought we had it to a certain point,
Yeah.
we posted it online.
We
And
did,
then,
yep.
Yeah.
then it was available for public to look at. And then they have the opportunity to come to the open mic, say, hey, I looked at that portion of the plan. Did you consider this, 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 and the other thing? And then at some point, we're going to go back to that and take those things under advisement, I think.
it's a lesson learned from 10 years ago to now. I know I'll certainly be using social media a lot more to engage with the community, invite them to, one, update them on what the committee's doing, and then invite them to stakeholder meetings. The news flash, there's all kinds of technology. I think we have a lot more experience now than we did 10 years ago.
So I'm glad he's doing that because I'm very low tech. I don't do the Facebook thing or anything like that.
He's
so.
got help.
Lots of help. There is lots of help, yes.
Get the teenagers to do it for you.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you know how to do it.
Yes, I mean, it's yeah, right. It's meant to be a dynamic process, and I think that's what, the message you want
Yeah,
to get out
there's
to
not,
folks.
the committee last time had nothing to hide. We were up front, we were out front, and I see it the same way. I see as the committee needs to work on that section. We have 7 people that are very dedicated and good people, and we'll have a lot of opinions. I just remember from the last one, I talk about all the time. We had a citizen representative on there, Peter Robeson. Peter
Yeah.
Robeson was excellent. He wasn't involved in any boards. He just a citizen rep, came forward. Peter sat there, listened, and when he spoke, he had a different perspective, and it absolutely worked into the plan, and it helped everybody become better.
Right.
So, and I look forward to that with Scott and Joe. So I think that they'll bring in a good perspective.
New people bring new ideas.
So,
And part of master planning is having people bring new and different ideas so that the community can consider those.
yeah.
One of the thoughts that I'm having is it was discussed when the selectmen were doing their goals for the year a week or so back as a mission statement. I mean, is that sort of a guiding principle for the master plan? In other words, sort of what does
Definitely has
sort
one.
of
We have one.
Okay.
There,
It's
there
more-
was one there.
Yeah.
More
So
for the physical environment.
okay.
I think part of the challenge with master planning is that it's not tied to fiscal planning. Maybe that's what the Board of Selectmen
Well, I think what it is there are
several.
several mission statements out there. As I said, the master plan had one. We have a financial mission statement.
Right, so maybe blending the two,
Yeah, I think that's
right?
the question. Is there some overriding, which is other than being a trite document? Oh, we want to be a great excellence and
Yeah.
everything, and I mean,
Right.
is there?
Well, that's part of the challenge of the master plan. Many of those recommendations, particularly transportation, facilities, have, the last plan didn't itemize the costs associated with those. And those are the chapters that are a lot more challenging to implement because they're not tied to fiscal reality. Maybe this time around, maybe that's where there can be some improvement. It's something we have to think about a bit more. But a 10-year horizon is pretty long.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you talk about we average $3 million a year on capital.
Yeah.
It's maybe that's an opportunity to really refine the 10-year vision so that it's more fiscally reality-based.
So how do you see the master plan update sort of tying in with the region and obviously the state as a whole? In other words, because obviously NIMCOG does a plan, and you're familiar, and obviously being
Right,
familiar with NIMCOG and the other communities.
transportation.
How do we fit in with everything that's going on around us? I know it's a loaded
You've been
question.
part of
but-
NIMCOG for a long time, and regionalization is huge.
right. So I mean, at one time there was talk about regionalizing 911 services,
Yeah.
which unfortunately that boat has sailed for Chelmsford to some degree, but.
But even like the
Tewksbury-
Rourke Bridge,
right.
Rourke
Took-
Bridge being a big one. Yeah.
Tewksbury and Drake are doing it. Now, the Rourke Bridge, they're in the next phase, which is the environmental study, and NEMCOG's push for that, and that affects us here in
Exactly.
Chelmsford through Drum Hill and through the Rotary and even down North Road. And it affects Tingsboro on the other end. So that, we keep pushing for that study, and that is something that we have to keep our eye on the ball. Yeah, it's Lowell, but no, it affects us. And that's what happens. You have to look at the plan. You have to look at not only within your borders, but outside your borders to see how everything ties together.
You saying traffic is not a Chelmsford problem?
Traffic is an everywhere problem right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And other towns affect what happens here. There's an accident on the highway, and we are backed up all over town.
I think the master plan calls it the transportation section of the
Oh,
master,
yeah.
master plan. But you're right. Even things like the commuter rail.
Commuter rail is
Commuter rail
still,
is
still
huge.
alive. It's still out there, but it's it's on a slow track.
Yeah.
So,
New Hampshire keeps flipping its
so to
side.
speak. Well, I mean, if we were talking about the commuter rail to New Hampshire and that,
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Still out there.
still out there.
Yeah.
and You know, even just going from Lowell to Nashua, you know, they talked about a stop somewhere, Chelmsford or Tingsboro, you know. Well, if they put that stop in Vinyl Square, that's really a huge impact to that area. To me, it doesn't make sense. But if it's further down towards the Tingsboro end, it may be just fine. But, you know, it affects the traffic going to Tingsboro, affects the traffic coming into Vinyl Square. And, you know, on some days, going through Vinyl Square can be tough. I live there. I live not too far from there, so.
Or if everybody just stops at Vinyl Square and picks up the train, you know,
Right,
we're
Yeah,
good.
no, we just got to keep them going.
Right, but you think 10 years ago, nobody was thinking, there was no Uber, Lyft.
No,
And
that's
nobody
true.
was talking automated vehicles either. I mean,
Right.
that's the thing. So you're right. Just like technology changes rapidly, obviously the whole aspects of transportation society is, and I think that's sort of the unique challenge, as you said. 10 years is a long time.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, you have a tough job every year. You have to come up with a budget. I know some of the ideas in the plan are, again, high level, but I looked at that plan and I didn't see too many that were fiscally out there. But, you know, we did recommend in the old plan that we stay the course on every year doing a capital. I think at that time it was 2.5 million.
Now we're
Plan
close.
Now we're
recommended-
close to
plan
3.5.
recommended an increase.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so to stay within some sort of a percentage of the budget and keep that momentum going, that's important to the town. Because if you let things go, you know, we're going to be in a hole, bigger hole.
Well, we saw that, I mean, it brings me the idea of the topic of education, because as you know, there is a proposal to invest in a school facility, and that's obviously a paramount investment for the community, because those facilities now, you're talking, you know, well over $100 million if you're talking any type of middle school, high school, and even an elementary school project, as we just saw happen in Tewksbury.
And that comes back to the vision.
The vision, and also, as we saw from Lowell's experience, if you let them go, the problems don't go away, they just get deeper hole.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the challenge. And the problem we have is like our neighboring communities, is the reimbursement rate for those projects is not what it is in the
Right.
urban areas. You know, I think Tewksbury's project, I think they got like 35 or 40% by the time they were done, because the state doesn't reimburse for certain things, like they won't pay for land, they won't pay for fields, they won't, you know, so you may do a project like Tewksbury did, you know, for their middle schools, but they're only paying the state portion, and then the community's on the hook for the rest.
Even the CPC, when I first
Right.
was on the board, CPC was matched 100%. Now it's like 19% or something,
Yeah, even worse, yeah.
you know, so.
Well, it's because they have the same funding formula, meaning the same level of deeds tax that they had when they established it well over a decade ago, and that's obviously an issue of
And
discussion.
not every town signed up right
Oh,
away,
there's
so.
more
We
towns.
Now there's
signed up,
everybody
we
signed
signed
up.
up early, but not at the full rate. But,
Oh, right.
but you know, we've been able to use that money. But
Oh, yeah.
now it's, you know, you got to be careful. You're dwindling.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
but-
Well, we've got a couple minutes to go in our program. Is there anything else you want to touch upon before we go? Or Evan, maybe just go over the highlighted areas, whether it's transportation, open space. You want to just sort of highlight people what's in the master plan?
Yeah, so there's land use and zoning,
Yeah.
housing, economic development, open space recreation, transportation,
Historic resources?
historic cultural,
Yeah, yeah.
and then a recommendations section. And as I mentioned, as George and I mentioned, this time around, the committee may decide that some of those major chapters can reference the standalone documents, and then there's opportunity to introduce some new chapters and new themes and concepts, such as, you know, age-friendly, kind of the green technology, low-impact development, climate change, resiliency, things of that nature. So we'll see. It'll be a good discussion with the committee, and we'll see, you know, what direction the committee is interested in going on as far as process. But ultimately, as George mentioned, it really is intended to be a community-driven process where the committee serves as that forum.
Great.
You see anything new coming up that wasn't thought of before?
I just mentioned a couple examples. It'll be interesting, you know, when the 2020 census comes out, which doesn't match up very nicely with the timing of this process. But what's the population? I know there's talk about if we reach 35,000, that's a critical number for certain issues. It's also a critical number for grants, certain grants at the state level.
Great, thank you. Well, we're wrapping up. George, I want to thank you for coming forward again and taking on this effort. And Evan,
Yeah, look
your
forward to it.
ongoing
Should be exciting.
contributions.
It'll be interesting.
It's like
Thanks for your
thank
help
you.
today, and thank you everyone for watching. And again, keep up with the master plan.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
normal
was easy.
body.
Yeah, we're supposed to-
Well done.
Yeah, see,
Yeah,
we're
we're
not,
done.
we're not